So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's newspaper or the important news items in that day's newspaper in a very short span of time within 20 minutes. Now, today we are going to be covering Friday's newspaper, September 13th, 2024's newspaper. And the important news items or the important topics that are important from the perspective of civil services examination are as following. So, let's take a look at the topics of the day. Okay, so in total, we are going to be focusing on four topics, and two of those topics are related to history. So this time in current affairs, history related topics are going to get covered. So your history is going to get revised. So topic number one is Battle of Saragarhi, the brave battle fought by 21 Sikh soldiers against the tribal militants from Afghanistan. So it was Battle of Saragarhi, 1897. 12th September is celebrated as Saragarhi Day. So we'll be talking about this. Then we'll be talking about story of great Sanchi Stupa. Recently, our external affairs minister visited German museum, and there they found a gateway to Sanchi Stupa. Okay, it was preserved there. A copy of it is preserved there. So that is why Sanchi Stupa was in the news. So we'll talk about this. Then we'll talk about Polaris Dawn mission. So what is Polaris Dawn mission? It is the first private space mission in which an astronaut was sent into the space, and that astronaut conducted first ever private spacewalk. So this mission is in the news because people say that this might have violated the International Outer Space Treaty. Okay, so we'll talk about outer Space Treaty, we'll talk about Polaris Dawn mission. And in the end, we'll talk about Nano DAP, diammonium phosphate. It's a fertilizer. And it's in the news because Nano DAP or DAP, diammonium phosphate, is used for the cultivation of wheat, potatoes. And Rabi season is round the corner, so wheat is going to be cultivated. That is why Nano DAP is in the news. All right? Okay. So without much delay, let's straight away jump to topic number one, which is Battle of Saragarhi, 1897. So September 12th marks the 127th anniversary of Battle of Saragarhi, regarded today as one of the finest last stands in the global military history. This battle was so unbelievable that it is considered as one of the greatest battle in the entire world's military history. Okay. Now, under this battle, there were 21 soldiers of the Sikh regiment. They fought against around 8,000 Afghan tribesmen. Okay, 8,000 Afghan tribesmen. All right. Now, and these 21 soldiers were able to hold these 8,000 tribesmen for 7 hours. They were heavily outnumbered. All of them died, but they showcased immaculate bravery, and that's why their name is forever imprinted in the history books. Now, Saragarhi, why was Saragarhi important? Because Saragarhi was the communication tower between Fort Lockhart and Fort Gulistan. Okay, so it was the communication tower, communication fort between Fort Lockhart and Fort Gulistan. Now, Fort Lockhart and Fort Gulistan were very important because many British troops were housed or were kept in these two forts. And the plan of these tribesmen, Afghan tribesmen, was that once they make these 21 soldiers surrender, once they win Saragarhi, they would have attacked Fort Lockhart, and many British soldiers would have lost their lives. Okay. Now, these two forts were actually built by Maharaja Ranjit Singh in Northwest Frontier Province when he had control over Northwest Frontier Province. But later on, when British took over from Maharaja Ranjit Singh, then the Britishers changed their names. Fort Gulistan was kept as it is, but Fort Lockhart was actually renamed. Okay, Fort Lockhart and Gulistan housed a large number of British troops in the rugged terrain of NWFP, Northwest Frontier Province. Okay, very close to Afghanistan. Now, more information about the battle. On September 12th, 1897, 21 soldiers were pitted against 8,000 Afridi and Orakzai tribal militants and managed to hold down the fort for 7 hours. They were heavily outnumbered. These soldiers belonged to 36th Sikh Regiment, now called the 4th Sikh Regiment, and it was led by Havaldar Ishar Singh. Okay, they fought till their last breath. They killed around 200 Afghans and injured around 600 Afghans. Though there were not only 21 men, there were 21 soldiers, but there was another man. He was the 22nd man, but he was not a soldier. He was a non-combatant. He was just a sweeper named Dad from Naushera. Naushera is a place. Okay, he also fought valiantly. Now, how does the British, Pakistanis, Indians remember these soldiers? Okay. Now, first of all, before the Battle of Saragarhi, Britishers never awarded any bravery award posthumously. That means after death. But In this case, Queen Victoria made an exception. When these soldiers died bravely, valiantly, these 21 dead soldiers were given the highest Indian Order of Merit, comparable to Victoria Cross. Okay, so 36 Sikh Regiment, the martyrs of 36 Sikh Regiment were awarded Indian Order of Merit posthumously. They were each of these families were given two murabbas of land, that is 50 acres. One murabba is 25 acres, and 500 rupees each. Punjab government in 2017 decided that every year on September 12th they are going to observe Saragarhi Day. In fact, Khyber Scouts of Pakistan Army, they also salute and mount a guard of honor to Saragarhi Memorial, which is close to Fort Lockhart. Now, Fort Lockhart is under the control of Pakistan, but Pakistani army also respects them, basically. The British commissioned Gurdwaras at Amritsar and Firozpur in the honor of these 21 dead soldiers. And Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee has named a hall after Saragarhi. Okay, especially after the movie, Akshay Kumar movie called Kesari. Many of you might have remembered that movie. Okay, it was on Battle of Saragarhi. Okay, so this was Battle of Saragarhi. Now let's shift focus to second news item, which is story of Great Sanchi Stupa. Now, why was this in news? External Affairs Minister S. Shankar on Wednesday stopped by the replica of East Gate of Sanchi's Great Stupa, standing in the front of Humboldt Forum Museum in Berlin. So the gateway, Eastern Gateway of Sanchi Stupa, a copy of it was made and distributed all over Europe. So currently it is placed in Humboldt Museum of Berlin. An external affairs minister actually visited that place. The ornate red sandstone gateway, which was unveiled in December 2022, is a 1:1 reproduction. That means the exact replica of the 10-meter high, 6-meter wide, 150-ton gateway, this gateway. Now, in Buddhist terminology, these gateways are known as Toranas. Okay? So these Toranas are legendary, they are beautifully carved, and that is why the Britishers, the Europeans who came to India, who saw this stupa, actually made copies of this and took back those copies to their countries and put them in a museum. One of those countries is Germany. Okay. Now about Sanchi Stupa. So basically, what is a stupa? A stupa is a Buddhist commemorative monument, usually containing sacred relics of Buddha, where Buddha placed his first foot, or a tree that Buddha touched, or his clothes. All these are known as relics. Now, on those relics, stupas are made. Okay. The archetypal stupa is a hemispherical structure whose origins can be traced to pre-Buddhist burial mounds found in India. So the practice of burying their dead and constructing a mound over it it didn't come to India through Buddhism. It is a pre-Buddhist practice. Now, the great stupa of Sanchi was commissioned in 3rd century BC by Mauryan emperor called Ashok. It is the largest and oldest structure in complex of Buddhist monuments. All right. Now, what's the story behind these torans? Okay, these gateways. So there are in total 4 Torans, each placed in the 4 cardinal directions: east, west, north, south. Okay, and these Torans were actually were not built during Ashoka's time. They were built later, during the 1st century BC, during the reign of Satvahana dynasty. It was a Deccan ruling dynasty. In Europe, the East Gate is the most famous of Sanchi Toranas. The East Gate was cast in plaster by Lieutenant Henry Hardy Cole for Victoria and Albert Museum in late 1860s. Then multiple copies of this cast were made and distributed across museums in Europe. One of them reached Berlin. Okay. Now, how was Sanchi Stupa discovered? So the Sanchi Stupa was in abject ruins. That means it was in ruins. People didn't know that it's a great Buddhist monument. Okay, but it was first discovered by British officer Henry Taylor in 1818. Then Alexander Cunningham, the founder of Archaeological Survey of India, he actually led a first formal survey and conducted excavations at Sanchi. Then this site was restored by another Director General of Archaeological Survey of India called John Marshall in 1910s. And the funding for this preservation was given by Begums of Bhopal. So these are certain facts about history that you need to know. All right? Okay. Now let's shift our focus to third news item, which is Polaris Dawn mission. Now, the crew of Polaris Dawn mission conducted the first ever private spacewalk. As you can see, what is spacewalk? Basically, when an astronaut comes out of their space station or space shuttle and actually walks or does some action in space. Okay, this is known as a spacewalk. Now, generally, these spacewalks are done by the space agencies of countries. Okay, but this is the first ever private spacewalk, crossing yet another milestone for private industry. Now, this mission was a joint mission between a billionaire called Jared Isaacman and Elon Musk's SpaceX. This mission was not at all NASA's mission, and that is why it was not regulated by NASA or any government. Okay, now people say that this might be a violation of Article 6 of Outer Space Treaty. Now, what is Outer Space Treaty? Let's talk about this. So, this is a treaty that came into force on October 1967, okay, during the peak of Cold War. And it was basically a treaty between different countries on the use of outer space and other celestial objects like moon and other celestial bodies. Okay, so basically, this treaty actually regulated the conduct of different countries in outer space. Basically, there were certain features in this treaty. For example, space would not be used for weaponization. Space won't be used to conduct warfare against any other country, right? So there were many provisions in this treaty which actually created rules for the conduct of countries or their space agencies in outer space. Now the thing is that Article 6 actually says that activities of private players in space shall require authorization and continuing supervision by appropriate state party to the treaty. Basically, when this treaty was being formulated, USSR said that we should ban private participation in space. But USA said that no, we should encourage private participation in space. And both these superpowers were standing on their ground. So, therefore, a compromise was struck. And under that compromise, it was said that private entities would be allowed, but they have to take the permission of their governments. Okay. Plus, if there is any mishap because of any private space agency or private company in the outer space, or any private company violates any of the provisions of outer space treaty, then the country from which that company is coming would be held liable. That means home country would be responsible for space activity that originated from their soil and also be liable for any mishaps. Okay, so that is the entire news that you need to know. Just know about outer space treaty. India is also a signatory to this outer space treaty. Okay, okay. And in the end, we'll talk about nano diammonium phosphate DAP, which is a very important fertilizer. Okay, look, Punjab requires roughly 5.5 lakh tons of DAP annually. Most of it is used in during the Rabi season, October to March season, to cultivate wheat, potatoes, and other horticultural crops. Okay. Now, generally, diammonium phosphate is used, that is known as granular diammonium phosphate in powder form. Okay. But recently, the supply of conventional or granular DAP has been unreliable, and there has been a sort of panic among farmers. Okay. That is why many agro scientists and experts have said that instead of granular DAP, we should now encourage farmers to use nano DAP, which is a discovery of Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative Limited in 2023. Okay. Now, nano DAP looks something like this. Granular DAP is in powder form. Nano DAP is in liquid form, and it is quite superior to granular DAP. Okay. Now, what is nano DAP? Basically, it was launched by IFCO in 2023 after the launch of nano urea in 2021. Now, these innovations are part of India's strategy to reduce their import dependence. Basically, India has to import a lot of urea and DAP. So, to reduce India's import dependence, plus have high quality fertilizers, IFCO invented these two liquid form of nano fertilizers. Okay, the indigenously manufactured nano DAP comes in liquid form. It is logistically easier to manage and more cost effective than granular DAP. Now, why is government promoting nano fertilizers over conventional fertilizers? Most certainly, these nano fertilizers are superior in technology to conventional fertilizers. Of course, that is why government is promoting them. Now, what are their advantages over conventional fertilizers? Okay, let's take a look at that. Advantages of nano DAP. First of all, nano fertilizers are cost effective. A 500 ml bottle of nano DAP, which costs around 600, is sufficient to cover 1 acre of land. Whereas if you're not using this liquid DAP, you need a 50 kg bag, which costs around 1350 rupees to cover 1 acre of wheat. Plus, for potatoes, you need around 3 such bags. Okay, so cost almost triples. Plus, these are easy to carry, easy to transport, so low logistics burden. Plus, India has to import a lot of DAP and urea from abroad. But with the manufacture of these and usage of nano fertilizers, India's import burden would get reduced. It is said that if most of our farmers use Nano DAP, India's import burden would be reduced by around 1.88 lakh crore for financial year 2024. Now that's a lot. That is why government is promoting Nano DAP over conventional DAP. All right. That's about it. And with that, we can conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I hope it has added some value to your preparation. So it would add more value if you're consistent and regular with this lecture series. All right. So on the hope that you are consistent and regular, I'll see you next time with next day's current affairs. Thank you, everyone.